Hey guys, Night Shadow here. Okay, so it's been a while since I read chapter 1, but yeah. Anyway, I finally gone back to this story because of, well, college is ending soon, and I want to get a new chapter in. And I finally got tablets working again. Recording app is back. I got the story downloaded again, so let's continue the story, shall we? Right, this is chapter 2 of It Takes a Village by Determined. I'm gonna try and do a voice acting again, but if I stop doing a spike halfway through, well, my usual spike halfway through, it's because it hurts my voice, and I don't want to go back and forth getting water. Let's get to it then. Right, so the sun rose appallingly early on Sunday morning, flooding Ponyville with thin golden light. Spike groaned and folded a forepaw over his eyes. Sleeping in the square was convenient, and certainly kinder on his back, but the wake-up calls were somewhat earlier than he liked. See, he's awake. What? See, he's awake. He heard some pony whisper. I am sorry, I'm messing up all over the place for today. No, he's just shifting, whispered some pony else. Nah, he's awake. You made a noise. So? Heaps of ponies make noise when they're asleep. Sleepers ever out of the blooms ring any bells? There's a difference between the sound of Big Macintosh snoring and waking up. There's a difference between the sound of Big Macintosh snoring and waking up, hissed the first voice. Yeah, and you can hear them both from the other side of the farmhouse. You're unlucky Apple isn't here to hear this. Think he might have put one hooves over his nose? It's cold first thing in the morning. Well, if he's awake, you can ask him. If he's awake, then you don't have to whisper, dummy. Started the second voice. There came the sound of a short scuffle as the two combatants tussled before a muffled "Ow!" proclaimed victory for the first voice. Spike had half listened to this with the detached befuddlement that goes claw and claw with being woken for earlier than usual. He finally cracked his eye open to see a blurred orange face peering back at him much too close for comfort. Ah! He blurted, his neck reflexively snaking its head away from the distorted orange apparition. It's just Scootaloo, Spike. Sweetie Belle moved into his sleep-blurred field of vision, her eyes dancing in amusement. Scootaloo had also jerked back in surprise at his sudden movement. To cover her momentary lapse of cool, she scowled balefully at her friend. I didn't think you would have just then, she defended herself, flipping her wings tightly against her back. Rainbow Dash's old goggles glinted in the sunrise from within her short, cropped purple mane. He slept through everything else. Everything else? That didn't everything else. That didn't sound good. Scootaloo gave him that seriously queried where his head was at. It's Sunday. And? It's Sunday. And? He stretched his back a little, hearing the bones in his spine clack and crack. So? Sweetie Belle giggled. Look around, Spike. He did, and then felt rather foolish. Oh yeah, he said, embarrassed. There were gaily colored stalls setting up all through the square. Banners, flags, and signs gently waving in the crisp early morning air. It was a long-standing tradition that upon Sunday morning a market opened in the main square of Ponyville. Weather permitting, every pony in the vicinity of Ponyville came to hawk their wages. Wagging absence of Apple Bloom from the usual trio was abruptly obvious. She would be flitting between her family's apple stall and her own little nascent woodcraft and artwork stall. Spike himself had even gathered the weekly groceries at the market before becoming too ashamed to step beyond the library doors. It was still so early that hardly any Ponyville ponies were out and about, and only the out-of-towners were visible, busily bustling to get their stalls ready for the crowd. The riot of colorful marquees glowing under the gleaming disk of Celestia's morning sun made his sleepy eyes blink. Although all seemed as it usually did on market morning, something about it was slightly off. But he couldn't quite put his claw in it. You slept through all the carts arriving. You slept through all the carts arriving and all the stalls setting up, Scootaloo listed. Right. You slept through all the carts arriving, all the stalls setting up, Scootaloo listed. Right. He yawned, then stood himself up on all fours and stretched like a cat. It is way too early, he muttered, rubbing his eyes with one paw. He flopped back down into his haunches and glared at the two adolescent fillies petulantly. Why'd you have to wake me up anyhow? Sorry, Scootaloo said sheepishly. Didn't mean to, Sweetbelle said, shrugging. She then bridled up and eyed the nearest stalls apprehensively. We were trying to, you know. It then occurred to Spike what was different about these Sunday markets compared to ones he'd attended as a baby. These were quiet. Why isn't anybody yelling what they've got to sell? He asked. I knew it's early, but that's never stopped them before. Well, Sweetbelle said reluctantly, we've kind of gotten used to seeing you sleeping in the square over the last few days, you know. It was a bit of a shock at first to see how much you've grown, but you're our friend, and we've known since you're a baby, but, she trailed off. There are a whole lot of folks who only come to Ponyville to settle at the markets, and they don't know you at all, Scootaloo said. They're a bit intimidating. We thought we'd come to get closer to you, show them that there was nothing to be afraid of. Oh, and to say hi, she added brightly. Spike sagged. Oh. So, hi? Sweetbelle ventured. He sighed. Oh, everybody knows that dragons are nasty and scary, so you'd be scared of the nasty old dragon. He muttered to himself with heavy sarcasm. The two fillies were peering at him worriedly. He cleared his throat and shook off the self-pity that threatened to rise. Sorry, he said. Scootaloo shared a look with Sweetbelle. We're not scared of you, she said, tipping her head back. Spike raised an eyebrow. I heard. Cold hooves. She blushed, and Sweetbelle snickered. He got himself comfortable on his belly and crossed his forepaws before him. All right, stick him over here. She stared at him incredulously. You're serious? He shrugged and laid his head over his feet with another sigh. You gotta be up this crazy hour? You might as well be warm, he said. I don't have anywhere else to be for a few hours yet. Somebody woke me up early, he added with a little scowl. He was abruptly crowded by the sight of four little hoofs swaying through the thin curling drifts of smoke from his muzzle. They were a moving blur of white and orange, and he blinked a few times as his eyes automatically tried to focus on them. You went cross-eyed! Guffawed Sweetbelle, while Scootaloo groaned dramatically in relief at the warmth. Oh, that's so much better, she moaned, her wings almost beginning to comb through the smoke. I thought they were going to snap off. Your friendly ambulatory furnace at your service, Spike quipped, and the two fillies snorted in unison. More furnacing, please, Sweetbelle said apprehensively. Appreciatively. It's really not too hot? It's really not too hot? He asked a little nervously. It's perfect, said Scootaloo, gyrating in order to stick three hooves and both wings into the smoke. She managed blissfully, teetering precariously on one of them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Spike hopes she didn't end up losing her balance. Deciding to ignore Scootaloo's increasingly bizarre contortions, he addressed Sweetie Belle. So, are you still taking lessons from Mate Mezzoforte? Twilight told me she'd agreed to teach you. That's a bit out of date. She laughed, waving her white hooves to make his smoke eddy and billow. I still see Madame for a technique lesson every now and then, but she passed me on to a colleague of hers in Canterlot. Sweetie Belle blushed in thrilled modesty. She introduced me to Bel Canto. I mean, the Bel Canto! The most famous singer in Equestria. It's just so exciting and glamorous. I take the train to Canterlot every week now to have my lesson. Oh, and guess what? Miss Canto says I'm going to sing in her next production. Eee! She squealed with her barely suppressed joy. Dang it! My deeper voice does not allow me to do high voice anymore. Ah, that was a bad Sweetie Belle. I'm sorry. Wow, Spike said, despite knowing utterly nothing about this apparently famous pony. I know. And, how about you, Scoot? What have you been up to? Spike asked, tilting his head so he could see the practically melting Pegasus properly, without removing the warmth that was apparently sending her into paroxysmus of happiness. I don't know what that word is. Paroxysms. I have no clue how to pronounce that, so I'm not going to try. Flying, skein, skewing, you name it. She grinned in satisfaction, her eyes lazily lit in the heat. I'm going to be the best extreme sports pony in Equestria. Don't forget, you knew me before I was huge. Before your head was, you mean? Teased Sweetie Belle. Oh, you can talk, Leatherlongs, Scootaloo admitted amiably. Anyway, the scooter routine's gotten the attention of the ponies that do the moving and shaking and these sorts of things. They love the Scootaloo spacewalk. Have you seen that one? I get this scoot really going, right? And then whoosh! And powie! Round and round and round. Sends them wild. I've got a few moves that I'm keeping in reserve. And I've got to perfect them before... Oh, Celestia above! What are you doing? The shriek came from a blousy unicorn with pale greenish blue fur and a peach-colored mane, which was tied in a knot above her ears to keep it out of her way, although whiffs of it were making a bid for freedom. An apron adorned her, and her face was almost comically distorted in fright. Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle shared a quick glance as Spike drew back, speechless. Well, we were talking to our friend lady. Friend lady? Sweetie Belle said pointedly, and we were warm for the first time since waking up. Skulked Scootaloo. You're in terrible, terrible danger, the apron unicorn said tremulously. Quietly now, just step away, and maybe you won't notice you were ever here. He can hear you by now. Sweetie Belle said, I think he's noticed by now. Look, we appreciate the sentiment, Scootaloo said, and seriously, I don't want to offend you or anything, but you're a bit of an idiot. The apron pony drew herself up. I understand you're scared, she said in a shaking but measured voice, but humoring it simply won't keep you safe, dears. Quickly now, run! I'll protect you! She drew herself up, and her horn began to glow fitfully. I should go, Spike went and began to stand. Yes, fly, foul beast, the unicorn declared hotly, as murmuring began to rise from the stands behind her. You shan't have them! Slink back to whatever pit you crawled out of! A few other shouts joined hers, and Spike cringed. You stay right there, mister, barked Sweetie Belle before nodding to Scoot. The orange Pegasus, with the racing stripes keeping mark, salutes her friend smartly before wrapping all 6 limbs around Spike's foreleg. You're going nowhere, she said. The apron stall pony was now close to hyperventilating. Phillies, get away from there, she shrilled. I can't do a high voice. I'm sorry, but I can't. Spike debated simply walking away with an orange pony clamped to one leg. Don't you know that, the words seemed to be too frightening for her to even think. Dragon, supplied a familiar voice helpfully. Murmurs rose from the unicorn supporters as a yellow earth pony walked serenely towards them. Apple bloom, Sweetie Belle said with gratitude. What in the hay is going on here? Apple Bloom asked, her eyes flicking between her friends and the newcomer. Our sartorially disastrous friend here, Cedarwell jerked her horn towards the grieving unicorn, has an issue with Spike. Uh-huh. Apple Bloom consider that. She was taller than the other adolescent ponies, and constant physical labor had turned a once-rounded and dainty little filly into wiry, indomitable steel. White and pink flowers cascaded down her flank, symbolizing both her name and her need to create. Her red mane was pulled away from her face with a pink band, which, in deference to her full hood, had a small pink bow jauntily perched on one side. Despite her still tender years, she carried herself with an undeniable air of authority, and she had the apple attitude in spades. She glanced back to where the stall-holders were all avidly pretending that they weren't eavesdropping furiously. So Spike anything to deserve this? He was just talking to us, that Goodaloo protested. It was about to eat their feet, screeched the unicorn. The murmurs of support from the ponies gathering behind her were rather more strident this time. Apple Bloom's coppery eyes regarded them evenly. Spike don't eat ponies, she said calmly. The unicorn pulled out her whispering name. They named it. As he, snarls Goodaloo. He's a he. Guys, leave it, Spike said. I'll just clear out to the farm or something on market days. And what does that end? Apple Bloom tilted her head up at him. Spike, think about it. You know my brother had a tale from me the other day. Said you were worried about getting run out of town. Well, you better make your stand right here and now, 'cause this is where it starts if you let it. Spike stared at her. She smiled faintly. Straight from Macintosh's mouth to your ears. He took a deep breath and released it slowly, trying to regain that sense of belonging he had felt when he realized that his friends accepted him just as he was, and he didn't have to leave at all. In the face of this knee-jerk prejudice, it was quite a task. He still wanted to simply leave the square and perhaps hide in the outskirts of the forest, but he recognized that Apple Bloom, and thus Big Macintosh, was right. He couldn't allow himself to be chased away by hysterical strangers, not when the town itself was solidly behind him. He had to stand firm as a full citizen of Ponyville, just like any other. Otherwise, his life here would only become a different kind of exile. With that in mind, he turned large green eyes on the greenish-blue pony and her fellows who had so readily assumed the very worst simply because he was a dragon. Look, I know what I look like and what I am, but you don't have the whole picture, man, he told her in a carefully uninflected voice. He didn't want to appear offensive or defensive, though the odds were admittedly stacked against him in that department. I was hatched in Canada, so I guess that's a pit I crawled out of. I moved here when I was a baby. Ponyville is home, and always will be. My sister lives here. My friends, everything I know and love. As to food, I eat gems and vegetables and apples and gems and bananas and cakes and gems. Not ponies. Sometimes rocked by anything because I think they're gems. I really like gems. A sister? The unicorn gasped in horror. Oh, great galloping goodness, there are two of them! Oh, this must be stopped! It must be stopped! Won't somebody think of the falls? We have to drive the monsters to Equestria! And it's Falster, both! A half-hearted chorus of cheers met this ringing announcement. Spike hurriedly heaved himself to all fours, Goodaloo still wrapped around his foreheads. He was both furious that they were threatening Twilight and desperate to make the increasingly rowdy bunch. No, please, he called into you have to listen to me, please! His wings half spread in distress, and their shadows spilled across the face of the small crowd. The group of fledgling dragon haters and their blouse ringing their gas and leaned backward in perfect unison, resembling nothing quite so much as a multicolored wheat field bending in the wind. In the resulting hush, Spike realized how he must appear. A dragon 3 times the size of any stallion with outstretched wings, the breadth of a building rearing menacing over a crowd of congregating ponies. Far too late, he drew his wings quickly against his back once more. The assembled ponies were staring fixedly up at him in fear and distrust, hanging on his head against their condemning eyes. Please, listen to me, he begged. I didn't mean to scare you. Please, don't think of me as the dragon, if you like. I'm Spike. I'm just Spike. No matter how big I get. Please, listen. Oh, for Celestia's sake! This is ridiculous! His sister was a pony! Yelled Sweetie Belle. He used to ride her back. He was as he used to ride her back. He was as titchy as any little foal you ever saw. He was as titchy as any little foal you ever saw, chimed in Scootaloo. He had a little round face and little soft claws, and Twilight used to get him to write letters and spells down, Apple Bloom remembered. He's been here practically our whole lives, Scootaloo said. He was there the day I got my cutie mark. Sweetie Belle raised her chin haughtily, the quaver-tailed diamonds glinting on her flake. Me too, Apple Bloom drew herself up, her jaws set challengingly. And me, Scootaloo piped up from around his leg. He has a crush on my sister that's lasted longer than any Fillywood marriage. Sweetie Belle threw her hooves in the air. Oh, you had to go there, Spike muttered. Why can't anyone keep that secret? Yeah, you call that a secret? Yeah, you call that a secret? Scoffed Scootaloo. You've been mooning over there since I was taller than you. Sweetie Belle rolled her eyes. You really live here? Came a voice from within the small group who had been haranguing him. Spike looked up eagerly at the lack of aggression at this because, yes, I do. I lived with Twilight Sparkle in the library. I was her #1 assistant. You still are, dummy, snorted Scootaloo. Nobody's ever getting a hoof on that position while you're around. Well, why don't you just go back there and leave normal ponyfolk in peace? Snarled the greenish blue and peach unicorn, and Spike's heart sank a little. He ducked his head. I outgrew it a few days ago, he said sadly. I didn't want you. I can't help it. It's just the way I am. You know, I think I heard something once about the little lizard that lived with the librarian from Canterlot. You know the poem murmured. Oh, I'm just terrible at reading today for some reason. Sounds of vague agreement rose from others in the assembly. Lizard! Well, I like that, Spike said indignantly, but Apple Bloom hushed him, her eyes watchful. Well, what about what I saw? The aproned unicorn challenged. You were about to snap those poor little filly's hooves clean off. You can't deny it. I have proof with my own 2 eyes. You really are an idiot, sighed Scootaloo, finally uncoiling herself from his foreleg. We were cold. Spike is warm. It's freezing here before the dew really dries, and he let us heat our hooves in his smoke. I say, would he let me do that? Colt asked rather suddenly. I keep thinking I need to check for chilblains. It was so cold this morning. Spike blinked and smiled hopefully at the Colt. A few ponies drew back suspiciously at the sight of all those teeth. Sure, if you like, he said, his voice tentatively optimistic. A general air of mistrust greeted his offer, so he added, and if any pony doesn't like the idea of that, then they can put their feet against my side. It's pretty warm compared to a pony's normal temperature. You weren't that eager to help us, accused Sweetie Belle, and Spike wrinkled his nose at her before sticking out his forked tongue at her. Well, you woke me up, he told sulkily. You great big bullies. Though the laughter that followed this display of childishness was a touch nervous, it finally broke the tension. Slowly and steadily, Spike lay back down on his belly and rolled slightly onto one side. His head stretched to rest over his claws once more. Scootaloo immediately shot over and stuck both front hooves back into the smoke, curling above his nostrils, and both Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle leaned companionably against his ribs. The aproned unicorn clamped her jaw shut in horrified mortification, turned on her hoof, and stalked stiffly away to pack up her stall. 3 or 4 of the visiting ponies followed. The rest, however, were edging closer to Spike. One by one, they tentatively made their way towards him, their expressions apprehensive. Quite a few made their way to lean their hooves against the side in his partly exposed pale green underscales. Far fewer seemed to want to stick their feet into the smoke rising from his muzzle. It was probably the proximity to the teeth and claws that worried them, yet a small number of the throng braved it, with that one colt in particular growing almost as ecstatically gymnastic as Scootaloo. Spike kept still and calm. If one of the former Cutie Mark Crusaders or new heat-seeking ponies asked him a question, he answered as quietly as he could. Giggles from the vicinity of his ribcage told him that his passengers could feel his voice through his skin. Other strangers spoke to him, their panic turning to shyness and inquisitiveness. He offered a little thing, the smallest thing he could do, warmth, and despite their initial fears, they accepted it. A new sort of determination gripped him. It was less euphoric than the heartful joy that his friend's acceptance had brought him, but it was firmer, steadier. He was beginning to realize that the challenges of carving out his life in Ponyville were going to be even more varied than he had expected. He had to stay calm and stand firm to succeed. He chuckled as Apple Bloom told jokes into his ear, and listened sympathetically as one of the ponies before his nose complained about the trip from Trottingham. He'd seen the first test, and prevailed with help from the Cutie Mark Crusaders. He'd won a skirmish, but it only just started the campaign, and the war was far from over yet. And to think, the day had only just begun. Trees are good, Spike said to himself with relish as he stepped through the orchard at Cheetah Acres. Trees are great. Breakfast as Twilight, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle had been an interesting experience. He'd had an audience to watch him eat his crate of fruit and vegetables, 2 rubies, and, a rare treat, a pink diamond. Some were checking to see whether he was snacking on a pony. Only he was snacking on a pony, he was certain. Others seemed to be growing more fascinated by his history and his different draconic self. Several of the crowd had followed him all morning, even so far as to trudge down to the lake to watch him take a bath. Well, that was a little TMI. He'd felt immensely exposed, and just plain old immense. Well, his dragon, I suppose he would, wouldn't he, right? Walking under their scrutiny along the bare road to the farm, and then, trees, blessed trees! Big Macintosh was just exiting the barn as he neared, and the red farm pony nodded to him in greeting as he walked back towards the farmhouse. Mornings, Spike. Be with you in just a tick. Spike sat down to wait, wondering what sort of thing constituted a strength-controlling lesson. He'd made good use of Macintosh's first piece of advice already. Moving slowly and steadily had certainly curtailed many of the accidents that had plagued him, though, of course, moving out of the library might have been something to do with that. Big Macintosh re-emerged with a large basket full of oversized vegetables on his back, and Spike tilted his head. I've already eaten, he said. These ain't for breakfast, Macintosh said as he placed the basket down by Spike and tipped it over onto the grass. Pumpkins, squash, and marrows tumbled over. These are for practice. With food? Yup. He nodded. I've noticed that you ain't using them claws anymore. I had to think about it, and I'm guessing you simply ain't used to their strength and size yet. That's gonna be the first lesson. Can't have you grab for something and break it. We'll get to judging your distances and how to tell if a thing can hold your weight in due time. First thing is to make sure you can get through a day without ripping it to pieces. Now, are you right-hoofed or left-hoofed? The lesson was bizarrely exhausting. Spike had to try to pick up the vegetables without piercing or shredding them between his claws. The first squash he selected turned into pulp almost immediately, and he sighed before steeling himself for another go. He had to concentrate very hard on the vegetable, and shit his paw very slowly and delicately, and he found it very hard to work despite the fact that he had barely moved. His focus wavered a few times, and he punctured his test vegetable, but each mistake was less dramatic than the last. McIntosh watched and nodded and made his laconic comments interspersed with his advice. "This'll help you a bit on judging distances, too," he said when Spike huffed in exasperation. "Don't you worry none about some mistakes," came after Spike had skewered another marrow. "You think this is dumb? My granny made me open and close doors for hours until I could feel how much force I needed to do without slamming them," he added when Spike faltered, vegetable mush all over his claws. "You think this is dumb? I'm gonna go on. After what seemed like a million pumpkins, marrows, and squash had been pierced, pulped, and shredded, Spike was beginning to get the knack of it. After he had lifted 4 vegetables in a row without piercing a single one, he looked over at McIntosh, flushed with victory. "Good on you," the farm pony said approvingly. "That's good work. Keep practicing that." "I don't get it," Spike said as he flopped onto the grass, feeling rather drained. "Twilight helped me to hold a quill again, and I didn't shred it to bits. Why am I having so much trouble with a few measly veggies?" "'Cause the quill don't get held by your claws," Big McIntosh answered in his slow, considered way. "I'm guessing you hold it by resting it between your toes." Spike looked down at his feet. "Oh yeah, my claws never actually touched the quill, even when I was little. They went around it instead." "Yup," said McIntosh, idly walking over to a close-standing apple tree. "A quill's long and thin, and you can grab it without any sharp bit skin involved. But your paw is designed to direct all your strength in them sharp bits, I reckon. So trying to pick up anything that ain't long and thin is a mite harder, especially small things." He eyed the apple tree appraisingly before giving it a carefully measured kick. A single apple thumped softly onto the grass, and the farm pony turned to Spike expectantly. Spike swallowed. "It was hard enough trying to pick up a great big pumpkin. I'm not going to pick up a tiny little apple." "How'd you eat them barrels I sent you, then?" McIntosh leaned idly against the tree. Stick my head in it," Spike said bluntly. "It isn't pretty, but I can eat." Want to fix that?" McIntosh jerked his head at the apple once, and then gazed at Spike steadily. Spike sighed once more. "I'm gonna squish it," he warned. "You were doing real well there with the last of them vegetables," McIntosh said recently. "Don't hurt to try, does it?" He steeled himself. "You're right. Okay." Carefully, almost tenderly, he lifted his claw above the little red fruit. He focused so hard he could practically see every freckle on its shiny skin. Hesitantly, he allowed his thumb and pointer claw to close as slowly as he was able. The tension running through his whole foreleg was unbelievable. "You got it now," McIntosh said. Spike breathed in sharply as the hard talons met resistance and began to lift. He turned his forelimb over to look blankly at the apple pinched delicately between his claws. His head came up. "I picked up an apple," he breathed. "Yup," said McIntosh, full of quiet pride. They'd want now?" came a voice from the farmhouse that made them jump, and Spike's concentration broke. His claws pierced the apple like a rice paper. "Ah, shoot," he grumbled, flicking the ruined fruit off. Sorry, Sugar Cube," was Applejack's bashful rejoinder. "Didn't mean to scare you none. Only it's almost lunchtime, and I thought you boys might want something to eat, seeing as you've been working out here all morning." "Is it?" "It is." Spike said in surprise, and looked up at the sky. Sure enough, the sun was now blazed from almost directly above them. The morning had simply disappeared whilst he bent his concentration on picking up vegetables. I lost track of time, I guess. "That'll happen when you're that focused," Macintosh agreed. Come on then, Applejack said cheerfully. Lunch, and then we can go and watch you making fireworks. We got last autumn's apples in the apple cellar if you want some. And you can practice picking them up too if you like. The sweet smell of apple blossom mixed with the pungent smell of turned loam as he neared the fallow end of the farm. The fields had been raked clean of weeds and grass, and bare earth rolled smooth and crumbly under his claws. Beside him, Applejack and Macintosh were debating what use to put the fields to next year. I still say it should be taters, Applejack said stubbornly. You say that every time these fields are going fallow, Macintosh drawled. We ought to call ourselves Sweet Tater Acres. Well, what do you suggest? What do you suggest? She challenged, and Macintosh hummed, his ever-present sprig of hay traveling to the other corner of his mouth. I reckon, he said slowly, we should put some carrots in there. Carrots! Carrots! Scoffed Applejack automatically, before she blinked and began nodding. Actually, that's not a bad idea you got there. There ain't no pony who don't like carrots, Macintosh said, eyeing the fields of satisfaction. What do you think, Spike? He glanced down. Carrots are okay, I guess. You're making a lie out of me, Macintosh snorted, and then turned to the fourth member of their party, who had been characteristically quiet since their arrival after lunch. You think we should plant carrots, Miss Fluttershy? Well, of course she would be quiet. She's always quiet. Oh, she said, startled at the sudden tension. Well, that is, I like them fine, but, my little angel bunny would be ever so appreciative. Macintosh's expression didn't change one iota. What is an iota? I mean, seriously. But his voice softened slightly. Well, I know you do like a caring for all them critters. So carrots it is, I guess. Your angel bunny, of course. Applejack stifled a knowing chuckle. Spike yawned hugely as he sat down in the middle of the proposed carrot patch. So, what do I have to do? He asked. Well, Fluttershy said in her soft little voice, I thought maybe you could start by blowing the very, very biggest fireball you can. We'll be able to see what the upper limit is that way, if you're okay with that. She finished meekly. He looked down at her, mildly surprised. Okay, well, if that's what you want. Better get well away, muttered Big Macintosh, and the three ponies hurriedly moved to a point perhaps 30 pony strides to one side. Let her rip, Spike, Applejack hollered. Spike inhaled as deeply as he could, and the familiar feeling of liquid sloshing into his flame chambers rumbled in his chest and throat. He half stood in order to relax the muscles of his diaphragm, his breath swelling, before opening his jaws and exhaling. A sheet of green flame erupted before him. He closed his eyes against the glare and continued to roar until he had run out of air. His knees sagged slightly as he dragged in a shallow breath, and looked up to see that a great swath of the fallow soil was blackened, dried, and charred. The area was approximately 3 times the length of himself, including his tail. Holy horse apples, came Macintosh's voice. Land sakes. That's one heck of an upper limit, Applejack said weakly. Well then, they're scared. Fluttershy said nothing, her legs trembling noticeably. Her wide, aquamarine eyes met his, and she swallowed before visibly getting herself under control and taking a deep breath. Then she regarded him contemplatively. "Oh, that was very impressive, Spike," she said with only the faintest tremor in her voice. "And it was a very big fireball and certainly quite hot." "You said to try the biggest," Spike said, his voice a little hoarse. "Oh, yes, yes. Oh, yes, yes." She nodded and began to trot cautiously over the blackened ground towards him. "I did say that, didn't I?" Behind her, Applejack and Macintosh shared a look of bewilderment. Fluttershy normally seemed some sort of catalyst in order to be assertive in that way, unless against her animals. "Now," Fluttershy said as she reached the dragon, "if you feel like trying that again, I'd be ever so grateful. But instead of just the fire just going everywhere, why don't we try to narrow the focus?" Spike squinted down at her. "What, like making it smaller and hotter?" "Exactly." She beamed up at him, her pink hair swaying. "Oh, not that that wasn't the most impressive thing I ever saw," she added hurriedly, "but perhaps you could try to have a little more control over it." Control. Spike was quickly beginning to hate that word, along with focus. "Okay, if you say so," he said, and began to stand once more. Then he stopped. You might want to go back over there." He jerked his muzzle to where Applejack and Macintosh were standing, their mouths ajar. "Oh, I'll be fine here," she said sweetly, her large and timid eyes full of trust. "I'm only beside you. Besides, you didn't get a single curl of flame anywhere but in front of you last time. I'm perfectly safe." "What if the wind changes?" Spike wondered. "It's quite all right," she said. "Please stop worrying and try it. If you want to, that is." Spike blew out a smoke-laden breath sharply, and reminded himself that he trusted Fluttershy. She was the Stair Queen of Ponyville, after all. Oh, I went from Stairmaster to Stair Queen. Huh. And had shouted down a dragon, a cockatrice, and a gala full of rich, famous, and painfully stuck up. "Okay," he acquiesced. She smiled prettily, cannot speak, and then expectantly turned her head to the expanse of blackened earth. Spike sucked in air once more, the depleted fluid in his flame chambers replenishing itself. He tried to focus on narrow, focused, intense, rather than simply big, as he began to release the fire in a long roar. His jaw elongated as he attempted to rein in the billows of his flame. "It's a little better, but perhaps you could try to move your head some more," Fluttershy suggested in his ear. He tried to adjust his soft paddling tongue in order to change shape and direction. This met with somewhat mixed results. His fire shortened and became more concentrated, but he still couldn't distill it into a single blade of flame. It wasn't until he lengthened his neck and set his breath barreling along the roof of his mouth that he hit upon the answer. Abruptly, the fire changed from a vague core with amorphous tendrils to a focused, sizzling, white-green tongue of flame, only a pony length long. What it lacked in length, it more than made up for in sheer ferocity. He could feel the power of it rattling the bones of his skull. "Woohoo! Yeah! Knew you could do it!" Applejack cheered. Yup, approved Macintosh, a glint in his sleepy green eyes. "Oh, congratulations, Spike!" Fluttershy beat her wings until she was eye to eye with him, her face wreathed in her demure smile. "That was ever so amazingly wonderful." He panted a little as he caught his breath and began to sink in. "I controlled it, didn't I?" he said exuberantly, his chest beginning to puff with pride. "I really did." "That's just a start, Sugar Cube," said Applejack, though her face was still proud. "Now the hard work really begins." What followed was both a lot of fun and a lot of work. They sent Macintosh back into the barn, and he came back carrying some old steel poles and soup cans. Spike drove the poles into the soft earth. Soft turned to earth and set the cans over them, and then tried to hit them from different distances, and with varying strength of flame. Applejack was a mine of information, garnering through years of warp trolling. It ain't necessarily about lining up the eye, she said critically as he missed his can altogether, blackening the mid-length of the pole instead. Especially as you'll soon from your mouth. You're gonna have to learn to judge where your real line of fire is, no pun intended. If you aim with your eyes, you're always gonna be off. Learn to aim with your brain. He nodded, panting, and fired again, trying to imagine the line between his mouth and the can rather than his eye in the can. It wasn't easy, but the resulting blast was closer than before. Fluttershy remained right beside him, gently coaxing him to try different methods, different breaths, and different stances. She wheedled, soothed, and encouraged him through every target and exercise, and, with her help, he somehow made his way through them despite his rapidly mounting exhaustion. Macintosh remained to one side, watching the lesson with a slightly singed stalk of his pain in his mouth, though occasionally his dark green eyes slid over to the Pegasus by the dragon's side. Spike was discovering that his flame could do so much more than simply send a message or blast what was before him. When he pursed his lips and blew very, very gently, a thin little line of green would waver in the air, barely visible to the eye. When he hissed through his teeth, the flames would flicker like a fire in a grated fireplace, and when he opened and closed his mouth while breathing out, puffs would appear like crackling green smoke rings. Celestia's sun was flaring pink and orange by the time he finally flopped onto the utterly charged soil and moaned, "I surrender." He mumbled in defeat, "I am pooped." "You done good today," Macintosh said gruffly and clapped his scaled shoulder with a shaggy hoof. "Yeah, that was darn good work, kiddo," Applejack said, and Fluttershy gave him a little smile that lit up her eyes. He groaned and began to pull himself up once more. Missed the period. His legs were as wobbly as jelly. "Guess I did get a bit back. Twilight'll be wondering where I am," he said, looking around at the blackened earth and winced. He winced. Sorry about the field." "Well, we don't need to buy no charcoal for the fertilizer this year," Macintosh said. "We're gonna be the biggest carrots you ever did see, I'll bet ya." "Oh, and you'll be so pleased," Fluttershy said happily. "Well, I hope so, Miss Fluttershy." Macintosh said it with a peculiar catch in his voice. "Actually, I better be going home to him," Fluttershy continued, her voice tinged with worry as she looked up at the setting sun. She began to beat her wings, floating gracefully from the field. "He gets quite cross if I'm late, you know. I hope to see you all very soon, and that was ever so wonderful, Spike. You're going to be just so good with your fire. Oh, I just know it." "Thanks so much, Fluttershy," Spike called after her. She waved a hoof once, before flying away into the honey-warm afternoon light, her long tail curling behind her. Macintosh stifled a sigh, and Applejack rolled her eyes. "You are so hopeless, brother of mine," she said with fond amusement. Oh, you hush up now," he muttered. Spike watched this exchange in bemusement before shrugging. "Whatever. Anyway, I better go home," he repeated, yawning once more. "Guys, thank you so much," he said rather more seriously than, his eyes sincere. "I can't tell you how much this means to me." "Oh, go on, you sentimental reptile." Applejack brushed this off affectionately. "Go see Toi. I bet she wants to hear all about your lessons." He grinned. "Gotcha. See you soon." The siblings waved him off as he began to walk back to the town proper. His gawkers had long since disappeared, and his body was pleasantly heavy with the weariness that comes with hard work as he trudged along the farm road to the main thoroughfare of Ponyville. The doors of the little balcony set into the library's ancient old tree were open, and so too was the main door to the street with its great upper door jamb. He stuck his head inside. "Twilight," he called. "Twilight, you home?" Spike, came a voice from upstairs, and he pulled his head out from the downstairs door. Balancing on his hind legs and tail, he hooked his claw carefully and gently on the railing of the back balcony and stretched himself up to peer in. "Over here," he said, tired but happy. She was sitting on her bed, books and scrolls piled high around her. She looked very startled to see him at her balcony, but smiled anyway. "So then, how'd it go?" she asked. "I am so tired," he said pathetically. "Fluttershy is a slave driver, and Macintosh is twice as bad." I can't imagine that." She giggled. How about Applejack? "Don't even get me started," he said, shuddering. She hopped down off her bed and trotted over to look down off her balcony at his stretched body and legs. "Wow, that's quite a long way down, Spike. We should measure you sometimes," she said, impressed. He nudged her flank gently with his snout. "Food first," he pleaded. "I'm starving. Applejack gave me some stored apples. Not all that many." She gave him a skeptical look. "How many is not all that many?" He rolled his eyes. "2 bushels. Hardly anything. Come on, Twilight. I'm sore all over and it is really starting to hurt." "Okay, I'll be down in just a moment," she said, brushing his cheek before whirling back into her room. Spike unhooked his claw from the balcony and gingerly lowered himself to the ground. The muscles in his hind legs screamed at him as they braced his weight. He looked over at the barrels and crates stacked by the library, full of his meals, and set his jaw in determination. "Right, here goes," he muttered to himself. "What was that?" Twilight asked as she stepped outside to the darkening square. "Well," he said, squirming, "I'm gonna try to eat dinner while picking up the apples. It's one of the things Big Macintosh taught me." She looked astonished, and then pleased. "Oh, well done, Spike!" He sat down and grasped the barrel cautiously before dragging it towards him. He studied the nailed-down lid for a moment before sticking his pointer claw straight through it and yanking it out. The disc of wood clattered to the ground, and he gently set the barrel down before himself. He glanced up at Twilight's encouraging face, focused on the uppermost apple as hard as he could, and carefully, delicately pinched it between his talons before offering it to her. "Want one?" he asked tentatively. Twilight's hoof gently lifted the apple from his claws, and she smiled at him with pride in her eyes. "I'd love one," she said. He fumbled the next apple and stuck his thumb claw right through it, but Twilight didn't mention it. "So, what else did you learn?" she asked, getting herself comfortable as the stars started to wink between the clouds. Spike was woken the next morning by a loud, crass burp. I'm sorry. That was fake. Well, first one was, but anyway. He set up an alarm, checking the square for any damage. But the brief burst of flame thankfully hadn't singed anything important, though several of the flagstones directly before him were red-hot and clinking as they cooled. He relaxed in relief, flopping back down onto the now heated stones, and his claws moved against something that rustled. Curiously, he picked up the oversized piece of parchment and laboriously unpicked the ribbon. Claws were a real pain. Smoothing at the letter, he began to read. "My dear Spike, I was surprised to hear from you the other day for 2 reasons. Firstly, I had quite forgotten how much time had passed since I had seen you. That can be an issue when you're as old as I am. And secondly, I was in the bath when your letter arrived." Oh, TMI, Celestia, TMI. It must have been a very difficult time for you, and I fear the challenges you face are no less daunting. Always remember that you are surrounded by the magic of friendship. I was so proud to hear your friends are helping you in this time of adjustment, and equally proud to hear that you plan to help them back. True, change can be frightening, but it is not always bad. You are to be congratulated for your great courage, my little dragon, though perhaps I should not call you little any more. A word of caution. Keep in mind that you will not always succeed. There are many ponies that fear and shun the different, and there are skills that will take many years to master. Continue to face these odds with the bravery and honesty of your letter, and always trust in your friends. I hope that you may count to me among them, and send me word should you need my assistance. Princess Celestia. P.S. My little sister is remarking over my shoulder that you seem to be a rather different sort of dragon, and she would very much like to speak to you. I feel you both would benefit from each other's friendship. I do hope she can call on you. P.C. Princess Celestia. Well, that was awesome, to, say the least. Yeah! Yeah, anyway! I messed up a few times there, but it's been a while since I've done a reading. Yeah. I think a few months is quite a long time. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to get more chapters on my channel now. Also, on fanfiction.net, I have a story that I myself am writing. Only the first chapter's up, though. So, yeah. Okay, so like always, the, link to this story will be in the description below. And if you guys want the link to my story and to my profile on fanfiction.net, leave a comment below. And as always, if you like this reading, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also say what you want me to read in the comments below as well. So, yeah, without any further ado, here is my new outro. Let the stars be your guide. See you guys.